Hello, I think I've met most of you at some point on this journey, but I'm Sarah Prag. I'm independent sort of coach and consultant on digital service design and so on, so I've been working with the DCLG team, but with sort of slightly independent hat on. And as Linda's mentioned, I've been working alongside Paul's technical work on the business case, and that emerged, it was always going to be a priority for the central DCLG team to understand and quantify the benefits of this work. But what was really encouraging is during that discovery phase, all of the local authorities and suppliers that we spoke to also really prioritised having a financial model, a business case, and it emerged as a really strong theme that all of our collaborators wanted as well, which, as Linda has mentioned, is why we've dedicated quite a bit of time to it. And so today I was just going to share a couple of things briefly. One is just to sort of a recap, or if you're new to it, just a quick headlines about what the approach is that we've taken to the business case. This is the latest version of the headline numbers. Some thoughts on what some of the wider opportunities might be, and I'd be really interested throughout today to hear from all of you on your take on that, and there's an opportunity to then feed back. So yeah, the fourth point is then how you can feed back on the business case work, both today and actually over the sort of coming days and weeks. It's really been about trying to quantify the benefits of a standard, and particularly in the current climate, that means the savings. So I think the sense was there was a lot of kind of anecdotal evidence and a lot of support in principle for the idea of data standards and how they could help local government to deliver better, more efficient services. But it's been quite hard. Certainly at the beginning it was very hard to find hard numbers. I've now spent many months working with some of you in the room and going through several iterations to try and really quantify this, and it's still a beta. We still have, I think, there's the opportunity for more data if people have it. But it is about quantifying those benefits. And the approach we've taken, in keeping with the rest of the project, is very much a sort of bottom-up approach of working very closely with local authorities and suppliers, looking at a service end-to-end, so waste, mist collections, and then extrapolating that out to all of waste. So it's been very bottom-up. And actually, currently, it's still quite local authority-centric, so it's very much about the savings that councils could make. And last week, we had a really great event with quite a few different representatives of suppliers in the private sector, and they're all sort of now giving me feedback as well, so that hopefully the final version, which we're going to be working on in the next few weeks, can have a more rounded picture and actually speak to the benefits for the supplier side as well as the council side. So yeah, I did an initial alpha version back in September, which we published. We had lots of really useful feedback on that, a lot of support for the approach, which was great, some quite detailed feedback, a bit more data came forward, which has been fantastic. And so what we published last week, the week before last, and what's available on our site and a few copies at the back is the beta version. So it's definitely an iteration upon the alpha. It's not the final version. We've got another few weeks to produce the final version. So hence, sharing some headlines with you today in the hope that you will have some further thoughts and feedback to share with us. In terms of what's changed, moving from the alpha to beta over the last few months, I realise this might be quite hard to read, but there's three main things really, and again, there's a lot more detail in both the sort of PDF document and the spreadsheet, but just the sort of key points I think are, firstly, obviously, not all councils are the same, which we knew all along, but in the alpha version, I sort of had a generic view of a council, an average council, and of course, there isn't really such a thing as an average council. And so the beta business model recognises that in two ways. So firstly, we've made a distinction between the roughly 50% of councils who manage their waste service in-house and the 50% who outsource their waste service to a waste supplier. So that's an important distinction which we hadn't made in the first version. And then secondly, we've also tried to reflect the fact that councils have are at different stages in their sort of digital and technology evolution. So some councils maybe are already pretty confident. They've already got quite a lot of platform thinking and APIs in their organisation. They've already got an in-house team who kind of are already working in these sorts of ways. Other councils, probably the majority, we think, aren't necessarily fully set up to embrace this yet, may have a few more steps up the hill to climb before they're ready to fully embrace the standard. So we've reflected that in the beta model by talking about 25% of councils being digitally confident and 75% being less digitally confident. Again, that's all up for debate and feedback before the final version. But what it gives us is more of a range now. So rather than there being a sort of single view of a council could say this, therefore the big numbers are at the bottom, It's now actually a range of depending whether you're in-house or out of house with your waste contract, whether you're digitally confident, less digitally confident. And so that hopefully gives a slightly more detailed and more balanced view, which can only be a good thing, I hope. The second thing we acknowledge even more in the beta is that the savings will build over time. So we acknowledge this in the alpha, but we thought that every council in 7 years' time will have realised all of the benefits, was our sort of initial starting point. And of course, that's probably not the case. And so what the beta says is actually, let's talk about 14 years, because the average length of a waste contract is 7 years. So great, the next time you're renegotiating, if you outsource, you could benefit from the standard in some ways in terms of drawing some of the resources we've prepared, but it's probably only the second time that you go through procurement that you're really going to be fully benefiting, because you will have set things up so that a lot of the barriers are less second time around. And similarly, even for those councils that don't outsource, we've taken that 14-year window just for consistency, and we've said, well, actually, probably, and I think this is quite conservative actually, but that every council will probably refresh their waste services twice in a 14-year period. And by that I mean make improvements to the digital experience, or bringing in a new CRM or a new customer account, or it's inevitably a bit more piecemeal and iterative than a big refresh and then another big refresh. But the model sort of suggests that there's those 2 points in 14 years where every council will implement changes to their waste services, whether they're outsourced or in-house, and that at that point, the first time there's some benefits of using a standard, the second time you really feel the benefits. So it's now a 14-year window, which feels quite a long one. I work in, come from a digital background. I hope it won't take 14 years to realise all of the benefits, but we've decided to be conservative and sort of put that as, it's almost sort of like the worst case scenario, I think. And then the final main thing to point out in terms of the changes that I've made is around channel shift. So in the alpha, I still very strongly believe that true channel shift will not be achieved unless councils are able to offer a more seamless end-to-end digital experience for both the citizen and the staff who are having to process customer contact. And I think that standards are a really important part of enabling that. So I continue to make that case quite strongly in the beta business case. However, we do separate out the numbers and say that we believe the standard will achieve X amount of savings, and also it will enable, I think it's £142 million worth of channel shift over 14 years. So I think it's entirely valid to talk about that as a benefit that is attributed to this standard. But some people's feedback was, but hang on, channel shift's going to happen anyway, or you can't just say that's all about a data standard. I think it is going to be hard to achieve true channel shift without joining everything up more efficiently than it currently is. And actually, that's the main thing that I wanted to just sort of dwell on. This is the cliche of some Lego blocks. But the thing that has really emerged as a strong theme is integration. Integration. So regardless of whether your waste service is outsourced or not, you are still going to be having to join up various bits of kit in order to deliver an end-to-end service in a local authority. So that might be your website and the forms that sit within that. It might be a customer account that goes into a CRM. Then you've got back office systems. You've maybe got in-cab technology. And at every point along the way, there's potentially friction and cost and things that could be alleviated by a data standard. And so that has actually come out even more strongly in the conversations I've had since the alpha, and is even backed up. So in the new document, I quote various recent studies and surveys. So for example, when SIPFA and Red Quadrant did their customer contact benchmarking club last year in 2015, 68% of the senior officials who answered that said that better systems integration was the biggest thing that was blocking them from doing effective channel shift. So it's coming up, and the LGA have also dedicated a whole section to integration challenges in one of their recent reports, again referenced in my document. So it's not just us techies who are saying this, it's increasingly becoming a theme that one of the things that's stopping true service transformation is that it's too hard to get systems to talk to get each other. And one of the sort of visible signs of that is rekeying of data. So again, in a recent, in the National Digital Report last year, it was revealed that 54% of data from online web forms is being rekeyed in the back office by staff. And I just think that's pretty crazy. And it also came up, again, it's all in the document, but I think it was 49 senior officials who in the SIPFA, I think it was the SIPFA report, they said 49% of their services still involved a significant amount of rekeying. So that's one of the sort of tangible, it's not that tangible, but it's pain that your colleagues will be feeling every day. And in my mind, pain is equated to cost, because if they could be spending that time on something more useful, that would probably be good. So I've used this Lego analogy partly because I was trying to think about sort of how to bring this to life a bit for non-technical people. And I thought, well, one of the things I'll come to later actually about standards is that it sort of frees you up to pick and choose a bit more about which bits of technology you use and which suppliers you work with. And when I look at the current state of affairs, it feels to me like there's too much glue that's been, like people have been gluing together the Lego blocks because they've been buying some Lego from over here and they've built some Lego and they've bought some Lego from over here. And then they've gone through a lot of sort of struggle to get it all to talk to each other and have ended up gluing it together, which is sort of messy and also inflexible. It's quite hard to unpick that again. So I had this idea, I thought, oh, I need a picture of Lego and glue. And little did I know, who has seen the Lego movie? Because I haven't, and I really want to now. Because this is, you can't see him properly, but he's amazing. So this is the baddie in the Lego movie with a thing of glue. And I'm just going to read, I got this off a film review site this morning, and it said, the Lego movie features a terrifying menace called the Kraggle, or as we might know it, Crazy Glue, which the President/Lord Business intends to use to glue all the people, things and places in the Lego world together so that they'll never be able to be anything different. And it says, hopefully to the majority of people, the notion of gluing Lego pieces together will sound insane or at least abhorrent. But I'm sorry to report it isn't just an idea cooked up by the writers of the Lego movie. And he goes on to talk about how some parents have actually encouraged their children to glue Lego together. So I'm not necessarily saying that big business or the president are the threat here, but I do think there is something here about we're trying to unglue the pieces and then fit them together using a standard. You know, if you buy different Lego kits, you know that you're going to be able to fit them together, and you're not going to have to get the glue out. So this is my analogy of the day, and I'm going to be using this photo, I think, from now on. Back into the boring sort of details of the business case. I won't dwell on this too much, but basically, this is now simplified. In the alpha, I did an end-to-end view of a service, and I colour-coded it, and I said these are probably the cost areas where savings could be realised. I've simplified it a bit in the beta. It's all very apparent in the document. Just briefly, the 4 areas, because you won't be able to read it, are purple stuff. Apologies if you're colourblind, but in the document it's also laid out in text. So tendering and implementing a new waste contract, one area of cost where standards could help if you outsource. Second area, creating a joined up end-to-end digital experience. That's building your service with Lego, hopefully not using nasty messy glue, but it all fitting seamlessly together. So all councils have to do this stuff, whether or not they outsource. Customer contact, so the cost of all those phone calls, it's the highest, I think the district councils nationally, waste is the single biggest reason people get in touch, and again there's more data in my report, but cost of all that contact. And then this box, which is red, is the cost of investigating all of that contact, which is where a lot of that rekeying and sort of going through piles of paper that have come in from the curbside and all of that sits in this box. And in terms of how that turns into numbers, and again I'll just do this briefly, it's all in the report, which is online and at the back, but the headlines are, we think now that the sector could save 500 million over those 14 years. As I mentioned, we've broken out channel shifts, so channel shifts 142 million of that, but actually the majority is not to do with channel shift, it's to do with running more effective services in the first place. And that, based on that sort of range of different councils I talked about earlier, it's between 115 and 215,000 per council per year once they're using the standard. And in terms of how that's spread across the different areas, you can read this, well, 33 million of savings around the procurement process, 59 million in terms of implementing joined up end-to-end digital services, 142 million from channel shift, and then this is the big one here, 265 million from all of that rekeying and ringing up the waste services team and rummaging through the paper and the in-cab system not talking properly to the system. And, so this is the big area, which is hence the Lego analogy, and that's where the real pain is, I think. And then just finally, some thoughts to leave you with. Is that so far this has been really rightly so in my opinion, it's a very iterative bottom-up view at how do we quantify the benefits of using a standard. Looking at a service, how many phone calls, how much time spent here. And that's all good, and I think that's what we needed at the core of it. But actually, the reason many of us get excited about standards is not just because it will help run more effective services based on how services are currently run. It's also about actually some wider opportunities. And so these are the ones that I've currently sort of identified and suggested in the document. And at the moment, it's very light touch, and I'm just saying I think these are the bigger benefits. But I would love to hear from anybody who has got an opinion on this or who has examples or case studies. So just to briefly run through what it says here, is that the first one I think is around partnerships and shared services. So I had a really great session with Mark Blaker from Somerset Waste Partnership, who's somewhere here in the room. There he is, thank you very much. He and Bruce were very generous with their time. And also Tom from the Surrey Waste Partnership gave an excellent presentation at our Alpha Showcase in October. And in both cases, those are, and I know there are other waste partnerships in the UK, but those are the two that I've been most exposed to. And they're already demonstrating the benefits of what happens when councils work together to sort of harmonise some of their processes. In the case of Surrey, it's very much around then reporting, and they think they're going to save 75,000 a year now that they've got a more standardised approach to reporting across their partnership. And I mean, Mark may be able to answer, if you're interested in Somerset, Mark's in the room, which is great. But there are some benefits of working together, and I suspect that there will be more working together in the future. And actually, what about devolution, in fact, if there are going to be new collaborations of councils in various parts of the country, in order to really work effectively together and to reap those benefits, standards could be an enormous part of enabling that. So that's an interesting area. Secondly, I've talked about the glue and big business. So I and other standards evangelists do believe that standards should open up a market. It should make it easier for councils to sort of shop around and to be able to try out different products and services. Now, I'm not necessarily saying you'd shop around for your overall waste service contract and change that every other year, because obviously there's a lot of logistics and things involved with that. But from a technology perspective, standards would help councils to be able to move to the latest bit of kit or try out some different things, or it just opens things up and potentially breaks out some of those rather locked-in, gluey contracts that some people are currently stuck into. Oh yeah, that's the second point there, freedom to shop around. And then finally, and this is sort of very much related to the other two, I think standards, Linda's alluded to this, should enable innovation. Well, they do in other sectors, they enable innovation. And so that could be about councils themselves coming up with bold new business models. It could be innovative business models like partnerships and shared services. It could be actually really beginning to reimagine how services are delivered and run, perhaps involving the community or local SMEs. But it's also innovation in terms of digital products and services, which could come from SMEs or from bigger companies. So it's about saying, actually, if the standards are there, people then have the confidence to innovate and to develop new products and new approaches that they can sell to the public sector, or that the public sector develops for itself. And so these, I think, are some of the bigger prizes that are potentially at stake here. But it's very hard for me to quantify this stuff. And so if anyone does have any thoughts or good examples, please let me know. And I've also been just sent a really great report from the BSI, which is about the economic benefits of standards and touches on some of this. It's 200 pages long though, so I haven't quite got through it all yet, but that will inform the final version. So just then finally, feedback. So, because we've got a lot to get through today, I'm not going to stand here and do a Q&A right now, and also there's a lot of numbers and detail here, which is quite hard to sort of gather on the fly. So at the back of the room is a table which has some printouts of the business case on it, but I'd also encourage you to look at it via, if you have got devices and are on the Wi-Fi, it's on our site. I think, if Henry's in the room, I think he just popped out, it's also on the app. Yeah, okay. So there are various ways to access it, but there are paper copies at the back if you'd rather. And there's also a big pile of post-it notes and a big wall where you can stick things. So I'm interested both in specific feedback on the beta business case and the numbers we've come up with. So if you're interested in that and you want to get into that detail, great, jot down any thoughts, stick them on that part of the wall. I'm also interested in all of this stuff, the wider benefits, So if you've got some more sort of philosophical thoughts about some of that, great, jot them down, stick them on the other side of the wall. It's all at the back there. Also, by all means, send me things. My slightly convoluted email address is here, which will be sent out afterwards. I'm also on Twitter, and I'm all ears for the next sort of week or two, and then I'm going to have to really knuckle it all down into a final version to be published in mid-March. And yes, it is about waste standards, but it is also about standards more generally. So I would encourage you, if you have thoughts or observations from other parts of your world, please do share them, because it's not just about the bins.